And you have a key to the city of Burbank. How did that? You were given the key.
Again. It doesn't open anything.
Right.
You know, no, it does.
I'm telling you, this man is an institution in Los Angeles. Go on.
It opens the back door at Bob's Big Boy. That's what it does.
Yo, welcome to another episode of In a Minute with Evan Lovett, coming to you live from the I Am Studios. And today's guest is not just a special guest, but he's been called a treasure of Los Angeles by none other than the city of Los Angeles. We're talking about Emmy Award winner, stand-up comedian, but perhaps best known as a fixture in living rooms, kitchens, and beyond throughout Los Angeles for almost 40 years as the top weatherman in Los Angeles. I'm talking about Fritz Coleman. Fritz, first of all, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
It's an honor. I haven't met anybody in my career that knows more about the city of LA than you, and I love what you do.
Well, thank you for saying that. Not knowing more, maybe pushing a little bit, but doing more research. I am definitely research heavy, but I thank you and I appreciate you being here.
How many people research the area they live in? Very few people. We take so much for granted. And I think people that even have lived here all their lives learn little nuggets of information from you that touch a light bulb in their mind. And it's a great service you provide.
Well, thank you. I try. I love this city. We love this city. So it's fun to uncover these little nuggets all the time. Mm-hmm. And before we start, I got to thank my sponsor, Culver City Toyota. Go see George, the general manager. He'll give you $500 in dealer cash for any used or any pre-owned or any new Toyota. We're talking Prius, RAV4, Tacoma, Corolla. That's Toyota of Culver City. Go see George. He's going to hook you up. But now we're going to go see Fritz and talk about Fritz Coleman. Now, I want to set the scene, and this is the truth. If you grew up in LA, if you were in LA, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, right up through COVID, Fritz Coleman, I mean, you could not escape this face right here. Very unique face and a great approach to the weather. But it wasn't just that you were a weatherman. You were truly a personality and a person that was synonymous with Los Angeles for 4 decades. So I want to start there and just tell me about being somebody who was known in Los Angeles. And again, you could say it was a weatherman and he provided the weather, but you were so much more than that to the people of LA. What do you think about that?
I agree with everything you said. I consider the fact that I had employment for 40 years a gift. And when you come into people's homes at the same time every night for 40 years, without exaggerating, you become part of their family. And news does something that not all media does, and that is that we break the fourth wall. We're looking right at the camera. Yeah. So you set up this intimacy with people over a 40-year period, and you really get incorporated into people's lives. And it's a privilege. And even if they don't like you, they know who you are.
I'll tell you this, you're hard not to like because of your approach. Again, you're a stand-up comedian by trade, right? Mm-hmm. Not a trained meteorologist. Is that correct? So you're actually a stand-up comedian that learned the weather in your words, a city that has no weather.
Right.
Correct. But it was that levity, I don't want to say you didn't take it serious because you did deliver the reporting, but there was a friendly, affable component to all your reporting that just made it easy to embrace Fritz Coleman.
Well, I appreciate that. I always describe my job as being the palate cleanser between the tragedy and the sports.
Right.
I provided a service. I was the least threatening part of the newscast unless there were El Nino storms or wind or something. And it was the one part that people could just take a breath in. And you're right. And you had to be aware of the flavor of the news around you. If it was severe, you had to honor that if it was a tragic story. Yeah. But it was a moment for people just to take a breath. And you're right. It was a different time. I got hired from the Comedy Store.
Right.
And I'm not a meteorologist. Real weathermen hate this story. But but it was a time when there were fewer stations doing news, and it was less hard as it is now, in that it was in the evening like it is in the morning now, which is a familial atmosphere where you would talk about what you did on the weekends with your co-anchors and all that. And oh yes, let's do a little news as well. But now it's very different. When I first started, it was 2, 7, and
2, 4, 7.
2, 4, and 7.
Yeah.
And then we started to add these independent stations, 9, 5, 11, and 13.
Absolutely.
So there was more competition. The world got darker. And there's the shortening American attention span.
Oh, yeah.
People have control over their lives because we gave them the clicker. So if you bore them for a nanosecond, they're out. Right. So it's so different now. It was more familial and comfortable and sort of personality driven when I got into it. Now it's really hard. Now you have to have the AMS seal, the American Meteorological Society seal. Wow. You have to be a meteorologist because of climate change and the competition. It's a totally different world. I could not get hired now if I wanted to.
Well, it's interesting because things have changed, and I wanted to delve into the fact that local news is absolutely not what it was. Okay, growing up, I mean, probably up through 10 years ago, even local news was a fixture in every household. Whether people preferred, some were channel 2, 4, 7, like you said, the small or more independent stations came in. And now with so many options and social media and quote unquote new media and YouTube or even just websites, weather.com, apps, there's so much competition, but local news was the thing. And it was the place to be, to the point that in the 80s and 90s, I think it's fair to say you were a celebrity, right? You had commercials. There was Fritz and Fred. And what was the thing? Fritz said it would be like this, right?
Yeah, well, Fred Rogan and I benefited from a lot of great promotion.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of promotion. Yep. But you're right, it was a different time then for a whole lot of reasons. And LA local news people occupy a different seat. If you go to Boise, Idaho, or New Orleans or somewhere, the local newspaper were the biggest stars in town.
Yeah.
But in LA, we have real stars.
Right.
So you're not really a star. You're like a friendly neighbor. You know what I mean? It's in LA, news people are one notch below dinner theater in the hierarchy of show business. But people have a friendly feeling about you because you're there every day, but it's not quite stardom.
I don't know, because I'm thinking, and again, I'm glad you brought up, or I brought up Fred, but I mean, like, again, you really were these strong, well-known personalities. I mean, with the there's a commercial that you guys had with the Lakers and things like that, where that's not a small deal. Yeah. Like, look, we know LA is the land of celebrity, whether it's Hollywood celebrity or sports or whatever.
No, you're right. We benefited from astonishing promotion. They spent a lot of money. What they did was, I took a comedic approach, or even broader than that, a friendly approach to the weather.
Yeah.
And Fred Rogan made sports palatable to people that didn't even care about sports. Right. He made it amusing and entertaining to people that didn't even care about sports. So our boss was had the foresight to say, here are two guys that are different. Let's just promote them because they're a positive at the station. So they spent tons of money promoting us, and we benefited from that.
I think you said a key word there. You guys were different, especially you, because again, your look, your personality, your approach.
You mean thin with glasses? That look.
Frankly, yes.
On, yes, I get it.
It's a unique look, right?
This is my Harry Potter as an octogenarian look.
There you go. Yeah. Wow. Octogenarian, huh?
It's a big word, I know.
It's a great legacy, though. I mean, that you're still at this point, like, out there producing. And I do want to get into the stand-up comedy because that's the core of what you do, and you have a really great show going on right now too. But let's go back to the beginning for a second, okay? You were born in Philadelphia.
Right.
Same place as my mom, by the way. My mom's from Philadelphia.
What town?
She was from Strawberry Mansion.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful there.
And then she came out here when she was 6, and she passed away, by the way, in 2019. But she always had Philly in her heart, and thus I always have a soft spot for Philadelphia. So you grew up in Philadelphia. First, let's start there. How long were you there? I know you ended up going to the Navy, and we'll get into that. But tell me about Philadelphia first.
Philly was an astonishing place to grow up.
Okay.
If you have any interest in American history, no matter where you live in Philly,
Absolutely.
I lived right next door to a Revolutionary War cemetery. I mean, there was just history. I learned how to sled toboggan in Valley Forge Park, and it was a great place to grow up. As a young man, I couldn't wait to get out of there because I wanted to go have my life. But it was a great place to grow up. It was safe, and the school systems were wonderful, and it was great. And either my family is dead or they've moved from there, so I don't get back there very much anymore. But it was an amazing place to work. I went to a couple of high schools there. I went to Valley Forge Military Academy for 2 years. I went to Temple University for 2 years.
Yeah.
I worked in the radio business back there for 10 to 15 years. And it's where I grew. It's where I became who I am.
You mentioned Valley Forge, and then you were actually in the Navy. You enlisted and you served in the Navy,
Right.
correct? How did that progression occur? Was that directly out of high school? Was that before?
It happened me flunking out of college. This was at a period of time when they still had the draft.
Yeah.
And when they had the draft, if you fell below a C average in college, you lost your student deferment. And I cleared that bar by a mile. When I was a sophomore, my first college I went to was Salem College in West Virginia. Yeah. It was an enclave of underachievers. And I dropped below a C average, and like clockwork, 60 days after I started flunking out of college, I got a message from the Defense Department. We'd like you to come for a physical. We're considering you for employment. So I went down to 401 North Broad Street in Philly, very close to where your mom grew up, and I took a physical. And there were representatives from each of the services, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. And the best decision I ever made in my life was, I knew that if I got drafted into the Army, I was going to Vietnam. Yeah. I didn't mind serving my country. I thought I could do it better without a gun. Yeah. So I picked up all of my clothes, walked down to the Navy recruiting desk, and signed up. And it was amazing. It was 4 of the best years of my life. I was on a ship for 3.5 years. Wow. I worked for Armed Forces Radio and Television. Okay. I learned my career. I did a radio show on a ship. I did the news. I did the weather on a ship. That's where I learned my whole career. And the beautiful thing about it was, on this assignment, because you were working for the Defense Department, regardless of how badly you sucked, you never got fired. You just did your job until you were discharged. Right. And there was a lot of freedom in being able to be bad for 3.5 years at what you did without getting fired.
And there's no better way to learn than through failure and through screwing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Where were you Were you stationed? I don't really understand.
I went to boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Training Center. Okay. After boot camp, I went to 8 weeks of electronics school. And then I was stationed at Norfolk, Virginia on an aircraft carrier, the USS John F. Kennedy, which was the last conventionally powered attack aircraft carrier in the Navy. That was before the carriers went nuclear, where you had the USS Enterprise and the Eisenhower and the George H.W. Bush and all that. So I was on a steam-powered aircraft carrier. I did 2 tours in Europe. This is during the Vietnam War. Yeah. I got to go to Europe. I learned how to ski in the Alps. I went to cover the Grand Prix at Monaco for Armed Forces Television. It was unbelievable, the amount of amazing experience I got. And I never got shot. I didn't have to go to a war I didn't believe in, and I never got shot at. So,
by the way, thank you to all veterans and anybody that served. I mean, that's something, I never did. And I have the utmost respect for anybody who did serve in any capacity, whether or not they had a gun or got shot. No. I mean, truly is a courageous
service. I think there should be service. I'm a parent. I have 3 kids, 2 in my 30s, 2 in their 30s, 1 in their 20s. And I'm a firm believer in you should have to do some service for your country. Doesn't have to be military service.
Right.
But if you would do 2 years like working in national parks or working in public buildings, I think it would be a great service to the country.
You know, one of my close friends, Tim, is actually a park ranger, and he's up in Channel Islands right now, and he loves it. He loves it like every day, and you know, falling in love not just with the great outdoors, but the service aspect of it.
100%.
And it really is
100%.
super important for building the strong foundation for the United States, honestly. So going back to the Navy, I find it curious that you flunked, I don't want to say flunked out of college, but you weren't passing with...
I was really immature. I was one of these adolescents who had no idea why he was on the planet.
Right.
I never stuck to anything I started. And I went to college in Clarksburg, West Virginia.
Okay.
And West Virginia is Appalachia, and there's an 18-year-old drinking age there. It was a recipe for disaster for me. So I had a bad time, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Always in the back of my mind, I wanted to try broadcasting because I love DJs, and I wanted to do that. And the Navy gave me a chance to do it. And it was one of the 3 things that I requested when I went to the recruiter, and they sent me to this training school in Great Lakes. And I'm telling you, between that and my 40-year career at NBC, I'm the beneficiary of the greatest amount of good luck of anyone I've ever met. I'm so lucky, so lucky.
Look, my dad used to actually say, I'd rather have luck than skill any day.
1,000%.
Yeah, and I always found that very interesting. But you need luck on your side to give you the breaks.
Well, you have to work hard. However, I will say that luck, timing is insanely important.
Absolutely. So after the Navy, is that when you went back to Temple?
Yes.
And Temple University.
Right. To put on a yarmulke for services.
Exactly.
No, I went to Temple University for 2 years.
Did you feel, hold on, did the Navy straighten you out as far as giving you that focus?
That's why I say to you, it was the greatest decision I ever made. Because when you join the Navy, when you join any military branch, for the first time in my life, I couldn't quit. I signed up for this. I got to finish it. And it was the first time I was ever forced to do something I signed up to do.
Wow.
Plus, I grew up. I learned to be self-sufficient. I learned the discipline of the military life. And I'm an only child. Yeah. It learned me to get along with others and be able to do teamwork and everything. It was so important. To this day, it was the best decision I ever made.
So your is that how you're discharged when you're done with your tour of duty, or how does that?
I signed up for 4 years.
Yeah.
I served 3.5 years because this was the end of the Vietnam War, 1972. Richard Nixon was the president, and in order to downsize the military, didn't need the forces. He gave everybody a 6-month early out. Wow. So I had signed up for 4 years, but did 3.5 years.
So you didn't even need to finish.
No. And when I got out, I had the GI Bill. I went to Temple University for $3,000 a year in a time when it's $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to go to a private university. Wow. I mean, everything about it is just dessert. It's just unbelievable.
And then, so Temple University, what impact did that have? That's kind of going home a little bit for you,
great.
right?
And I was on the radio, and Philly was my hometown. Yeah. And I got a job as a DJ on the radio in my hometown. That was cool. That was a great sense of accomplishment. But, you know, being a DJ is a very nomadic existence. You have to move around. So I went from Philly to Syracuse, New York, to Buffalo, New York.
What kind of DJ were you?
I was a top 40 DJ. I was a talk show host, a music director, a production director. I did everything at these radio stations.
So you were rolling up your sleeves,
and
learning
all because of the training I got in the Navy, this free training.
Okay. So you go to Syracuse, and you end up going to Buffalo.
I got hired out of Syracuse to go to a 50,000 watt Clear Channel station in Buffalo, which is huge. Yeah. At night we were heard in Bermuda, heard in the Midwest. It was astonishing. So I did DJ work while I was in Buffalo. This was in the era in radio when DJs would get jobs hosting at clubs at night. Okay. So I got a job being the MC several nights a week at a jazz club in Buffalo, New York.
Hold on. Were you ever shy, or were you always this gregarious, outspoken?
No, I was an attention whore for the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So MCing, you're like DJ and MC.
I just
Let's
love it.
go.
I love it. I love getting the laughs, and I love being in front of people. So, one of the gigs I had as a DJ was to host at this jazz club in Buffalo called the Tralfamadore Cafe. It's a very famous jazz room. Wow. All the famous old jazz players would work there. And when you were the MC at a jazz room, the show was advertised to start at, say, 8 o'clock. But jazz players are on their own clock.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling the set yet. I'm not ready to go on. So they'd be in the trailer, doing a bong.
Yeah,
and
what jazz players
we're
do.
going to play when we play. However, the owner of the club had advertised that the show starting at 8 o'clock.
Right.
So I had to go up and talk at the start of the show at 8 o'clock, read all the upcoming acts, and had to kill time until the jazz players were ready to come on stage. And purely as a defense mechanism, I began to write material for myself so I had something to say in front of this audience. So I started to build this little block of comedy. And I had a 10 or 15 minute set of comedy. Right. And then it got so successful that the owner of this club gave me my own night. He said, we're going to give you Monday nights, which are dark in the jazz room. I want you to build a comedy show. You do your own show, bring other players into town. Buffalo is very close to Toronto. Toronto had a spectacular comedy circuit called Yuck Yucks. I mean, Jim Carrey came, Howie Mandel, all those guys came down from Canada.
Really?
Yeah, it was amazing. So we built this room, and then I was smitten by the comedy business. I said, I have to go to L.A.
Had you thought, and no. Going to L.A., this is when it gets fun, really fun, but had you thought about comedy before that?
I never thought that I could do it professionally until I got fairly proficient in this jazz club environment. And if you can make a jazz audience laugh, they're very discerning and picky, and
especially
smart.
When they're there for jazz and
not
not
they don't care
for
about
comedy.
Bring out the sax player. So I had always. I'll go back a little farther.
Yeah.
So when I always liked comics on television, Carson and Ed Sullivan. But my uncle, when I was in 11th grade, gave me 2 tickets to see George Carlin at this outdoor music venue in Philadelphia as a present. Now, I had seen comics on Carson do 5 minutes or 3 minutes on the Ed Sullivan Show, but I didn't understand the science behind being a comedian where it takes several years to build an hour and a half set.
Right.
So I'd never seen a guy doing it. So he comes out, and George does like 90 minutes of this brilliant wordplay.
So brilliant.
And he had the ability to make it look like he'd never said the words before. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you it was a religious experience. I felt like I was watching a TV evangelist. The audience was crying. They were laughing so hard. I said, that's the greatest amount of power a human being can have over a large group of people, is to entertain them with no notes, no nothing except a bottle of water for an hour and a half. And my life was changed. I never thought I could do it professionally. Yeah. And then when I got to Buffalo and I started emceeing these things and I got fairly proficient at it, I said, well, you know what? I could do this. And that's when I decided to come to LA.
First of all, George Carlin.
Come on, man.
That's who I didn't grow up with him, but my parents were big stand-up comedy people, right?
Yeah.
And I remember this George Carlin baseball versus football.
It's brilliant. It's a brilliant piece of material.
But all of it, the 7 dirty words or whatever.
Yeah.
But George Carlin, absolutely brilliant. So wow, what a good springboard.
So he was my hero. And also Robert Klein. I don't know if you're familiar with his stand-up work. He was this brilliant guy with so much stage presence and smart. And he went to Yale Drama School, and he wasn't afraid to be smart on stage. And I don't know, those were my heroes.
Now, were you a clean comic or a dirty comic?
Yeah, no, back when I started,
I
was a clean comic. You had to be.
Even at a jazz club in Buffalo?
No, you had to be, you couldn't use profanity.
Okay.
What sort of freed up the whole stand-up business was cable television. And I was coming up before that. If you were trying to get on the Carson show, which I did 8 times,
Yeah.
you had to work clean in clubs, because if the talent coordinator, his name was Jim McCauley, came to see somebody in a room, was auditioning somebody, and saw you on stage and you were blue, as they say, or dirty, he would never come and see you again. He wouldn't trust you. Wow. So you had to discipline yourself to work clean. And you could never swear, obviously, on the Tonight Show. So we all disciplined ourselves to be clean. Now, in my news show, Unassisted Living, I work completely clean. There's no profanity.
Right.
I talk about adult material, like people with Medicare cards having sex and that kind of stuff, but I don't use profanity. But that's a discipline I learned early in my career.
Right. And it is, listen, I'm pretty free flowing with the curse words, almost to well, let's just call it as to an excessive amount. But you're right. There's the ability to turn it on and turn it off. Yeah. And, but
I opened for Joan Rivers a couple of times,
wow.
And she said, one well-placed F-bomb in an act is all you need. If you just use it at the peak of the emotion of your whole set, just drop an F-bomb, people love it. And then don't dwell on it. Yeah. I thought, okay, that's pretty cool.
Okay, so George Carlin was the defining moment, the religious experience. You're in Buffalo. You're doing comedy just as a way to kill time. And then you're like, hey, maybe I'm good at this, writing the material, getting your own night, young and upcoming talent, Carrie, Mandel. And then so go back to the point where you're like, I have to go to LA.
I have to go to LA because all the comedians who were performing on the Carson Show, Jay Leno, David Letterman, Freddie Prinze, all of those guys all said they were working at the Comedy Store. I said, well, I guess I have to go to the Comedy Store.
Yeah.
So I sold an insurance policy for $5,000. I had a new car that I was trying to pay for, and I came out in 1980. And
had you been to LA previously?
I'd never been to LA before. I had done commercials with a woman who had an apartment out here who was nice enough to allow me to sleep on the floor of her apartment until I found my own place.
What do you mean did commercials with?
I did commercials. When I was on radio in Buffalo, I did lots of commercials.
Okay. That's got it.
And so, I got out here. I'd never been to LA before.
Yeah.
So I came to town. I go to her home. I drop off my sleeping bag and my small backpack full of possessions. And I said, well, I have to go to the Comedy Store. So I go down to the Comedy Store that night. It's like going to Mecca. It's like, if you build it, they will come thing. And I had been looking forward to this for so long. And I just became a member of the audience. And on stage that night, my first night at the Comedy Store was Gary Shandling, who was preparing his first Tonight Show performance. Jimmy J.J. Walker from Good Times, who was hysterical.
Wow.
Billy Crystal, at the time when he was doing
this. This is your first night?
This is my first night there, right? And a guy who is not known in a huge way in the comedy world, but I think is like Robin Williams brilliant. His name is Charles Fleischer. He did the voice of Roger Rabbit in the movie Roger Rabbit. He does lots of cartoon voices. So this was like an all-star game of comedians.
Yeah, especially on night one.
At the end of the night, I was so crestfallen. I thought to myself, whatever gave me the idea that I was good enough to come out here to LA, it was awful. I was so depressed. And I thought, well, I have $5,000. I'll stay in LA till my money runs out. Then I'll go back home. I'll beg for forgiveness. I'll see if I can get my old job at the radio station back, and I'll pick up where I left off.
Yeah.
And then I just started doing the open mics. I did the open mics at the Improv and at the Comedy Store, where on Monday night you go and you sign up at 2:00 in the afternoon. You get on at 1:00 the following morning. It's an awful experience that you can only do once in your life. And then I got saved. Again, this is this stroke of phenomenal luck. My old boss from Buffalo in the radio station came out to run an LA radio station. And I get a call from him. And he said, how would you like to come over? I'm going to do this country music station. I don't know anything about country music. Yeah. He said, you want to come to an automated station? Come and do the voiceovers for me in the morning, 5 to 10 o'clock. Yeah. And I said, oh my God. You're going to employ me? I didn't have to leave LA. I had a job. And it was, again, this stroke of amazing luck. So I would be on the radio from 5 to 10 in the morning.
What station do you
KZLA.
Okay.
It was what they called an adult contemporary station. Then it became a country music station. And it was a very easy job because you played 3 records in a row and you just read a card back selling the radio.
So you're working for this country radio station, not know much about country music, but you didn't have to because you're just doing reads. But you're lucky that now you have a job and you're settling into Los Angeles.
I didn't have to move because I had a source of income.
And this is what I wanted to know. Where were you living in your first residence in LA?
I lived in West Los Angeles on Iowa Street, across the street from the West LA Police Department. I could see the West LA Police Department from my apartment, yet still I got 3 bikes stolen out of my garage while I lived across the street from the police department.
So even back then, huh?
Even back then.
That's interesting. What were your first thoughts of LA? Comedy aside, though. I want to know your first impression.
I love the weather. I love the beautiful women. I love it was crowded. It was overpoweringly crowded. And my first thoughts were I had really made a mistake coming out here with as little experience as I had. When I saw this room full of brilliant, competitive comedians, I thought, oof. So when my boss came to town and offered me this job at KZLA, I at least could survive with that job. And then I just started doing the open mics. And I did the open mics for 2 years. And then I got hired as what they call a paid regular at the Comedy Store, where Mitzi Shore, who was the owner of the Comedy Store, approved me, and I would get 2 or 3 spots a week. And so in 1982, my friend who worked at NBC in the news department brought his boss to see me do a show Friday night.
Hold on, was he a new friend that you had made in LA or somebody you knew from?
I made in Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
I was in radio and he was in TV, and we worked for the same company, and we came out here totally separately. But he was my friend, and he brought him to see me. He and his wife, and so on stage that night. Incidentally, this is a true story. On stage that night, I talked about having done the weather in the Navy and working for Armed Forces Television, doing the weather, but not knowing anything about the weather. But the Navy didn't seem to care. We just want you to get up there and communicate. We don't care if you don't know. Just make sure your shoes are shined, you don't use profanity, and you say "sir" at the end of every sentence. So I told a couple of anecdotes about doing the weather in the Navy, but not knowing anything about it. After the show at the Comedy Store is over, I went backstage to meet my friend and his boss and his boss's wife. And this guy said to me, "Do you have any desire to come to Channel 4 and do some vacation relief weather forecasting for me? I have a Maine weather guy who hasn't had a vacation in a year. I need some help on weekends. Could I interest you in doing that?" And I was making $25 a night at the Comedy Store. I said, "Oh my God, when do you want me to start? And I'd be happy to carry your wife to the car for you." I mean, it was unbelievable. He said, "Well, you have to audition." So the following week I auditioned. I got this job.
Was it an open audition or was it just...
No, it was just me. He saw me, pulled me in, put me in front of the green screen and had me talk about weather. And I got that. I got the weekend job. I did the fill-in, the utility job for 2 years, doing weekends and fill-in. Then 2 years in, my predecessor, who was the main weather guy, left, and I was bumped up to the main job. And again, I retired 2 weeks shy of my 40th anniversary at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I always tell people, it's the greatest stroke of Hollywood luck since that woman was discovered at Schwab's Pharmacy in the 40s.
Oh, wow. Yes.
No, I mean, it was unbelievable.
You stayed not just in that business, a very competitive, cutthroat, highly desirable industry for 4 decades. 2 weeks, you said 2 weeks shy of 40. Yeah. But you were in a major market, the number 2 market. Number 1 in my heart, by the way. But number two market. Like, and let me tell my little anecdote. I actually had an internship at NBC in 2000 in the sports for Fred, under Fred and those guys over there.
And you lived to tell about it.
And I'm not going to say I didn't take it seriously, but my dream out of college was to be a sports broadcaster. I wanted to fill Fred Rogan's chair, right? So
you'd be great at that.
Thank you, by the way. Well, So I had the internship, and interns need to work hard, and you show up early and you work hard, you get coffee and you make copies and you leave late. I was like, no, there's going to be a screen test, they used to call it, at the end, where you get to do one read as Fred Rogan, you know, as it were. And then they'll make a tape for you, and that's the tape that you send off, because you're going to be, if you're lucky enough to get a job in that industry, you're going to be in Boise or Jacksonville or Omaha. If you're lucky, like, can't even dream about starting in Los Angeles. By the way, I completely tanked that screen test. I was on air, or not on air. I was sitting in the big chair, and I'm halfway through it thinking I'm doing well. The producer interrupts during the middle of the broadcast, and he says, he's like, can you please enunciate more? Thought I had a good vocabulary, but I had never encountered that word enunciate up to that point in my life. So I'm on the spot in the middle of this very important screen test that was going to launch my career. And I was like, what is enunciate? Oh, it probably means talk louder. So I just started talking louder. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, enunciate means be clear with your words and pronounce them better. So I'm just talking louder on there. Anyway, needless to say, that tape never went anywhere and that career never went anywhere. But even if it would have, I would have started at best in El Paso, and maybe a decade or 2 or 3 into my career been lucky enough to come to LA. So you talk about a stroke of luck.
First jobs are so important because, first of all, when you get to a major market, there's a lot of pressure to produce. It's very competitive. And your first job, you find out who you are. You find out what you're good at. Some people are good at doing hard news like freeway chases and stuff. Some people are better at doing feature human interest stories because they can write better in that genre. So your first couple of jobs are really good because they teach you who you are and teach you to have confidence and teach you to not be thrown by whatever's thrown at you. So
this was your first job, at least in broadcasting.
It was my first job in television. I'd been in radio for a while.
So you had the foundation. It wasn't completely foreign, but being in front of a camera is a different thing.
Crazy.
How you're thrown in the fire in a major network in one of the biggest markets.
The hardest thing to learn was the technology, the computers, working in front of a green screen convincingly. But the good thing about the comedy business was it taught me to think on my feet. And there's nothing that could happen to me on the air that was going to throw me. As a matter of fact, I looked forward to moments when stuff went south because then I can improvise a little bit. But the miracle of me being employed was I wasn't smooth. I wasn't polished. And this news director, and I'll say his name to put it into the universe as a way of saying, bless you, Steve Antonetti, for taking a shot at me. He had to convince his boss in New York that you're going to hire a stand-up comic to do weather in the second largest market in the United States. He said, well, it's your job, and he stuck by me and he was my friend. And so that's what happened.
Were there hard lessons along the way? Once you're at NBC, were there, oh no, I screwed up big time, I'm out of here? Or was it... I
never had like a big dramatic screw up on the air, but you do learn things. Like I mentioned before, you have to learn to sort of read what's going on in the news around you. Yeah. Because if there's a lot of blood and guts at the top of the newscast and suddenly you're Mr. Happy and you say, wait, do you hear this funny joke? People, you have to be very aware of your surroundings.
Right.
And it took me a long time to get used to that. So I learned that way.
But now, so you're successful, you're into it, you get that full-time gig. What happened in the comedy? How are you balancing? Because you still, in your heart, right at that point, came out here to do a Comedy Store and be the headliner and be the comedian.
I would do 2 or 3 sets a week, even when I was doing the weather.
Yeah.
Because I had a split shift. I was doing the 4, 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news.
Right.
So I would go to work at noon, build my show, finish the 6 o'clock news at 6:30. I'd be off till about 9:30 when I'd come back and do the 11 o'clock news. So between 6:30 and 9:30, at least when my children got old enough to, do their homework and stuff on their own, I would go to the Improv or the Comedy Store and do a set and somewhere else. So I never stopped performing. People say, well, you sold out to do the weather. I said, no, I did as many sets when I was doing the weather as I would have as a professional comedian. I just didn't have to go on the road, which was a gift. I hated the road.
Yeah. Hold on. People said you sold out in the comedy
there's
industry.
A little bit of jealousy. Yeah. Jay Leno said, "Look, you're either a weatherman or you're a comic." I said, "Yeah, but you don't have kids. I have 2 kids. I'm giving them a stable upbringing in a beautiful home with they can count on me being there at the same time every night." And he also said that to Seinfeld, "You're going to do a sitcom, you're going to be a stand-up. Which one are you going to be?" See how that turned out.
Wow.
So he has a lot of advice for people.
Well, Leno has his cars, right? Some would say that's a full-time, preoccupation, if not occupation.
You're right.
Okay, so you're at NBC, you're landing. What was the first, I want to know from an LA perspective, how was your relationship with Los Angeles evolving? Where did you end up moving after you left across the street from the West LA police station? How were you acclimating to Los Angeles and parts maybe you were falling in love with?
I loved the weather. I had a girlfriend that I was very serious about in Buffalo. She was a cheerleader for the Buffalo Bills football team.
Nice.
And she decided to come and join me out here. So about 6 months after I moved out here, she joined me. And then we got engaged and we moved to Marina Del Rey for 2 years, which was really great. And then we got married and we moved to Pasadena to a condominium. Then we moved to our first home in Glendale. And then I got divorced, gave my home to my ex-wife and my children in Glendale so they could stay there. And I moved now I live in Toluca Lake. So all that happened, lots of moves.
Covered a lot of ground. Covered a lot of LA right there. Okay.
But always love this town. I love this town. There are too many people here. I'd like a couple of million people to leave.
Man, I was talking about this the other day. I have a close friend. He's a runner. So that'll tell you what kind of mentality he's coming from. I think running is incredible, but every time I'm out, I run once a week, and about a half mile in, I'm cursing myself and my friend Tim. Tim, shout out. You're a great runner and inspiration through resentment, I guess. Because I'm about a half mile in. I'm like, why am I doing this? Tim, you're great. But the thing is, he likes to run in the mountains and go on these trails and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, I want to see people. I like and he's like, you're such a city kid. Like, he's from Maine. So maybe it's something out there in the Northeast, but I like the people just personally. So
no, it's fantastic. It's multicultural. I love this area.
Okay, so let's get back to Toluca Lake, because you are known as the honorary mayor of Toluca Lake, which is a truth. Look this up. It's not just some honorific that somebody said. I mean, like, this is like Fritz Coleman is synonymous with it. How did this happen? Because Toluca Lake, by the way, this isn't just the land. Like, LA has all these enclaves where, well-known people live, but Toluca Lake, you're going back to W.C. Fields all the way through Denzel Washington, Bob Hope, one of the great. So Toluca Lake, we're talking
honorary mayor means absolutely nothing. They asked me to do it because I helped them and their garden club do some fundraising 27 years ago. And so I would do shows for them. Yeah. And they made me the honorary mayor. They had an honorary sheriff. They had, the honorary position. And so at Christmas, here's my one responsibility.
Okay.
On the first Friday of every December, I stand in front of Ramsey Schilling Real Estate on Riverside Drive, and I turn on the massive 5-foot Christmas tree and wish everybody Merry Christmas.
5 foot?
Yes, there's a little, not exactly the one in front of Rockefeller Center, but they always have a little Christmas program. It's a totally ceremonial position. I can't even get a parking ticket fixed in Toluca Lake. It's just a ceremonial position, but I love that little community, and I will do anything to sort of support and advertise the good of the town there.
Toluca Lake is awesome. One of my early LA in a Minute episodes was like the history of Toluca Lake, because I always felt, I knew it from Pulp Fiction. I mean, I knew it because I'm from LA, but in Pulp Fiction, they throw the Toluca Lake reference out there.
And in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they did a whole thing along Riverside Drive where they redressed the front of all the stores there to make it look like it did back in the 60s, wherever that time period was, and they never had it in the film. I mean, it cost millions of dollars. All these stores to make it look like it did back in that era, and they never used it. I thought, oh my God! And it took them weeks to set this all up.
Tarantino though gets what he wants. But just Toluca Lake a little bit, because it is an interesting community. It's like it's in the valley clearly, but Toluca Lake almost is sort of like. Really, they kind of want to be their own
We're
thing.
like the Monaco of the San Fernando Valley.
Wow. So how would you describe Toluca Lake real quick?
It's a little enclave that was developed by show business people who wanted to belong to Lakeside Country Club, which at the time was an exclusive club. No Jews or blacks. It's not the way it is now. Yeah. And also, you could walk to work at Warner Brothers. You could walk to work at Universal. And you could drive quickly to work at Disney. So it was in the midst of all those studios. But and they were beautiful homes. It was a great place to raise the kids.
Beautiful homes. Mm-hmm. Listen, one of our traditions every year for the Halloween season, but mostly for the Christmas season, is to go to Toluca Lake and just drive it with our son. And we just drive around and look at the house, because the houses are massive, but accessible.
And that's a good way to describe it. And the people are obsessed with decorating for Halloween and Christmas. It's amazing.
Out. Yes. Decked out is an understatement. You're Candy Cane Lane, which in itself is also incredible. But to look like the entire neighborhood, you go up and down all those streets, Valley Spring Lane, what's up, Foreman, all that stuff. But I've never seen the lake of Toluca Lake. Tell me about that.
You have to get a
Mr.
Pentagon security clearance to be able to see the lake. The lake is a small, beautiful lake.
Right.
I have one friend, Annie Potts, who lives there, who was, just finished her long, beautiful run on Young Sheldon and did Designing Women and was on the latest Ghostbusters. She has a thing with a little pontoon boat, and they go around at sunset every night, and it's beautiful. There are probably 10 or 12 homes around the lake. And Frank Sinatra lived there.
Yes. Amelia Earhart lived in Toluca Lake, for goodness sake.
Betty Davis had a house there.
Yes.
I mean, if you are a Southern California, show business historian in this person, you need to go there, because it's mind-blowing, the great history in that place.
By the way, Annie Potts, just because I probably will never have this opportunity, I had the most massive crush on Annie Potts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, going back to when it was probably one of my earliest crush. No, Designing Women. My mom used to watch it. I was like, but even in Young Sheldon, And
I'll tell you, honestly, she is one of the loveliest human beings you'll ever meet. She invites everybody into her family. Once you meet her and she likes you, then you're going to her house for all the holidays, and hundreds of people. And she's just a lovely, lovely person.
Annie Potts, you know where to find me. Okay, now tell me. So Toluca Lake is adjacent to Burbank, and you have a key to the city of Burbank. How did that? You were given the key again.
It doesn't open anything,
right?
It does.
I'm telling you, this man is an institution in Los Angeles. Go on.
It opens the back door at Bob's Big Boy. That's what it does. It's between Burbank and North Hollywood and Toluca Lake, and it's this little enclave, and I just love that little place. It's gotten very crowded. Riverside Drive has a little too much traffic on it, but the people love it, and the little shops are wonderful along that drive there.
How'd you get the key to Burbank, though? I want to know that stuff.
I think it was just that I had done a lot of nonprofit work for the city of Burbank, and whoever the mayor was that month presented me with a key.
It's every year, right? Burbank is 1 year term, I think, for mayors.
They did the city council people cycle through the mayorship.
Burbank has a very interesting pride. There's a sense of Burbank pride. And again, every LA community neighborhood has that pride, but Burbank is again sort of like fiercely independent. I always say Burbank looks like a movie set because there's not a piece of gum on the sidewalk. No. There's not a wrapper in the street.
That's a good point.
It's immaculate.
Yeah.
And then, again, it's always funny because it's a throwback in time. You have like a model train store. You have a gun and ammo place. You have a vacuum repair.
It's very middle American there. Yeah, it's really hard. Even with the adjacency to the studios and the other, the privileged show business people in Toluca Lake and elsewhere, But that's all the below the line people that live there. And the whole place, I mean, they have John Burroughs High School and all these high schools. I mean, they have talented children going to these schools over there. And it's a cool place. I don't get stopped by the cops for anything because the cops ain't playing in Burbank.
You can tell it has that feel
it's good.
Once you cross over, you're like, it's different.
Yeah,
it's different right here.
They're an independent. They have their own power company and everything, and their own police department and their own school system, and they ain't playing.
Okay.
But I like that.
Tell me this. You mentioned Bob's Big Boy. Bob's Big Boy says that we're in Burbank, but to me, that's Toluca Lake, right? The one on Riverside. And by the way, Fritz Coleman, another honor. Bob's Big Boy Hall of Famer over here, by the way.
This is sad. It shows how despicable my social life is. I eat breakfast at Bob's Big Boy every morning. That's awesome. I go in there because they have great breakfast. I get poached eggs and strawberries and bananas and buttered wheat toast, and it's fantastic. And then I go to Starbucks right next door, and then I go home, and that's my life.
It's a good way to start your day. But Bob's Big Boy, worth mentioning, oldest fast food chain in Los Angeles, and Bob's Big Boy was everywhere. Bob's Big Boy had almost 1,000 locations. They invented the double deck. They call it double deck. Yeah,
exactly right.
So I mean, like
lots of great movies. Heat was shot in there with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. They've shot tons of movies. You know, the Bob's Big Boy statue was launched into space in Austin Powers. What's his name? David Lynch used to sit in there in the middle of the night and write his odd, Mulholland Drive movies and Twin Peaks and all that stuff. It's cool. It's a cool place.
The Beatles booth.
The Beatles booth is there.
Were they really there?
I believe so.
There's no pictures, and I have searched high and low. I'm like, how did nobody get that picture?
They have a plaque that says this is the Beatles booth. That corner booth as you walk in.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing ever to dispel that rumor with me.
And there goes Jay Leno again, who has the classic Bob's. Is it Friday nights?
Friday nights.
The classic cars, and I'm not like a supercar guy, to be honest. But when you go, and I've gone a few times, like this is just some beautiful automobiles and like a great. It's that throwback because Bob's was the drive-in style car hop.
Yeah.
So
waiters and waitresses on roller skates would come out and see you.
Yes.
But on Friday night, there are cars in there there are guys that show up at like 9:00 on Friday morning to get a spot and to establish a stand, so that when people start showing up at night. It's crazy. You'll see some beautiful cars.
That's sort of a precursor to the lowriders on Van Nuys and stuff like that, in the sense that, we used to go to Van Nuys just to watch the lowriders and stuff. But one day when I was doing a report on it, I was talking to people and all this kind of stuff. They're like, yeah, we got 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m. to get like the best spots and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty significant right there. Okay, now let's talk about, I want to know, this is something that's close to my heart. The changes in news and media, and specifically local news, for 40 years, 1982 to 2020, or 1980 to 2020, you were doing it. What was the biggest evolution, or what was the turning point, the tipping point, or whatever, the evolution that you saw of local news in that point?
When I started, for some of the things we talked about ahead of time, the news was more personality driven.
Okay.
Particularly the weather, because you had all weathermen were doing weather at the same time on each channel.
Right.
So you had to have something about your personality or delivery that made people want to watch you. So you did something to carve yourself out of the pack. But for all those reasons we talked about, the shortening American attention span, the increase in competition with all the extra stations, plus you have 5, 9, and 5 and 9 especially doing news all day long. Yep. It's very competitive, and that gives them an advantage, because if there's a quake or there's a breaking news issue, a big fire, they're already up and running. So those of us that have bad soap operas on in the middle of the day, have to get up and running, we're at a disadvantage. So all that competition increased. Plus, it's the shortening American attention span. Part of that is the clicker, and part of it is that people's lives are so busy that they they don't pay attention, and they want all of their information in small chunks. So in and out. I used to get 5 minutes to do the weather at 5 o'clock because I could have a funny side story or something. Now you get 2.5 minutes because they're so afraid that people are going to go like this and blow off and get bored.
So that's interesting. Now,
that's the changes in the weather business. Technology has improved.
Yeah.
The presentations have gotten a lot more colorful.
A lot better. I consider myself an armchair meteorologist, by the way. I love it. I love it.
You probably know more about it than I do. But I mean, the presentations are still good. The accuracy probably hasn't improved that much. You know, we're in 85 to 90% accurate up to 48 hours. Then after that, it tapers off. The reason why we even do like a 7 or a 5 day forecast is because people insist on knowing what the weather's going to be over the weekend.
Yeah.
And so that's why they invented that, even if it's not 100%
And
accurate.
some have gone to 10 day. You've seen that?
Yeah,
I see the 10 day.
No.
So I always say this and all that, my old adage is that meteorology is about one tick more accurate than astrology. Like, so that's kind of the way that I look at it.
Read the Farmer's Almanac.
But it's so fascinating.
No,
I mean, I
love it.
want to dive into the show.
We thought when people got these apps on their phone that tell them, what it is at their address in Burbank, that was going to kill the local newscast, but it isn't, because there's a human element in the presentation of that. It's not just the information, it's the familiarity with the personality delivering it. So your phone hasn't killed the weather business.
Not at all. It's made it more appealing. And now to watch it, because someone who knows, even if it's not a meteorologist.
No.
Okay, let's get into the comedy, because that was your true love and the reason you came out to LA, and you're still going strong today. You have a residency at the El Portal Theater in North Hollywood, unassisted living. Tell us about that. It's a show.
I started like 20 years ago doing, and I came up with this name for myself. I don't know if anybody else uses it. A single topic monologue, where I pick a topic and then I write a whole show about it. My first one was about being a parent, called It's Me, Dad. The second one I wrote was about divorce. It was called The Reception. The third one I wrote was about the news, called Tonight at 11. The fourth one I wrote was my first show about getting old, called Defying Gravity. Wow. And then this is the one where I'm well into being old, there's no backing out, called Unassisted Living. So I like to take a topic, and not every single joke has to be exactly about the topic, but it's framed in this subject matter, the getting old. It's being people of a certain age. Somebody called my show a baby boomer support group, which is perfect. The Daily Variety said this show, Fritz Coleman is the spokesperson for the Metamucil generation.
Oh, my pants were
But truthfully, what we found out is, and I have one of my shows is running on Tubi now, that my demographic, baby boomers and older, people like 60 and older, are very underserved in the comedy area. Not only in sitcoms, I mean, there's Golden Girls and all that, but if you watch stand up on Netflix, you have Chappelle and all these wonderful comedians, but they don't approach the issues of aging as much. And so I thought, I'm going to find this little niche. And that's why we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary of sold out shows at the El Portal. And I think it's just connecting with people of a certain age. I tell people I start every show with, you can look around and see why we start the show at 3 p.m. We promise to have you home by dark, because it plays to my age group, my demographic. And I think we found a little niche for ourselves.
Are there comedians that are doing, who else is even out there that's going for that demographic?
There are women's groups that like do the senior lady comedy tour, where 4 or 5 of them go out together. There are, but it's not as big an industry as the younger comics. And so I'm just, I'm relying on people knowing me around Southern California. I'm huge between Santa Barbara and the Mexican border. Outside that, I'm nothing. And so I rely on people's memory of me, and we're having a great time.
Are you out there writing jokes every day? Are you working on material?
Yes, I am writing every day. After a show, then I do a day or two of a postmortem to see what that I did that was new that didn't work. It has to be rewritten. And then I like to write. I love the discipline of writing. I write for an hour or two every day. And I love the creative process.
Is it right after your poached eggs, strawberry banana?
Yeah, I know. Do I sound a little OCD? Yeah, it's one of the great. I think 50% of the joy of performing for me is coming up with the material.
Yeah, of course, and entertaining yourself and making yourself.
I'm hysterical when I'm alone.
Who are your favorite comedians working today? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Because
even go back, even you know what? Because we didn't do anything in between Carlin and Unassisted Living.
Williams,
Give me some,
Jonathan Winters and Robin Williams of the improvisational. Oh my God, where did that all come from? Bent. I love John Mulaney right now, who's hysterical. He's so good. I think Chappelle is wonderful. Yeah. Chris Rock is amazing. I think Jay Leno is still one of the greatest club comics in the history of the business.
Yeah, that's like what he's known for.
Yeah,
right? It's just
and those guys, I love everybody for a different reason.
It's interesting. And do you try to take little something from people? Not take, but influenced at all by anybody else's
Truthfully,
acts?
I don't like to watch comedy specials because you can have a thought when you're sitting down to write and say, wow, that's a brilliant thought. And then you get writing and you say, oh my God, that's somebody else's material. I just subconsciously, I subsumed it and then it came up. And so I have to be really careful. So I try not to watch a lot of specials.
Especially in that industry, people are fiercely protective of their work.
Yeah.
There have been some careers that have been tanked by
and you
plagiarism.
It's very difficult to protect your intellectual property in stand-up because you can't prove that you're the only person that ever had the thought.
Right.
But there are people who have gotten a lot of trouble for that. So
I want to talk about the legacy of Fritz Coleman because, again, to circle back, this is the truth, is Fritz Coleman was a fixture in Los Angeles living rooms, dining room tables for 40 years. And when you look back, is it a sense of pride? Is it a sense of accomplishment? How do you feel? And what is that legacy that Fritz Coleman has left in Los Angeles and beyond?
I'm thankful for all of it. I'm thankful that people invited me into their homes for 40 years, that they treated me like a family member. I have letters and pictures from people who named their Shih Tzu Fritz after me and their parakeet after me. But I'll tell you what one of the most satisfying parts of my job has always been was the nonprofit work I did, using my name to raise money for nonprofits, what I call community outreach work. I'm on the board of 3 nonprofits now. Wow. I mean, if people are having a fundraiser, particularly small and medium-sized nonprofits, they say, would you come and perform for us? If you do, we can double our ticket price. We can sell out and make some money. And how could I not do that? I love to perform. I'll do it. And it's no effort on my part. It's doing something that I'm already doing. So that part of it, it's all been satisfying. And again, I was able to give my children a stable environment to grow up in for 40 years. 40 years at one station, whether it's TV or radio, is insane.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
I'm so thankful for all of it. And the older I get, the more thankful I become. So to answer your question, I just want people to have a smile if they remember me, and maybe I help their group in some way.
And let's give a shout out to MediaPath, Fritz's podcast with Louise Palanker. I always mispronounce it. Louise Palanker, which, by the way, was the first podcast I ever appeared on, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. This was in like June of 2022, and even to this day, now that I've been exposed to more podcasts, the studio is great, the setup is great. That's all great.
She started Premier Radio Networks. She's actually a very successful person in her own right. This is a great story.
Yeah.
She used to write for Rick Dees.
Oh.
And so she and the other comedy writers got together and said, why don't we do a joke service for small and medium market DJs that can't afford their own writers? So they started this company. They would fax jokes every day and they built up this hugely successful business. They became premier radio networks, which sold to Clear Channel, which sold to iHeartRadio. So all she does is sit around and do her podcast now.
Come on. That's how premier radio started, was faxing jokes to DJs?
Then she ends up syndicating Rush Limbaugh and Michael Regan and all these guys. And, she became it's a great American success story.
That is a great story.
And so I've been her friend for many, many years. And she, when I retired, she invited me, she said, come and do a podcast because we're friends and we have similar thought processes about movies and books and stuff. She said, well, just talk about what we talk about. And I love it. I love just talking to people about stuff I don't know.
Yeah, and you're a great inquisitive mind. Yeah.
I hope to be able to provide a service like you do. I think that more people can learn the history of their area from your little snippets because you don't have to have a long attention span. No, you don't. That's the beauty of what you do, little things, and learn little nuggets of their environment. And I think you provide an incredible service.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you, for 40 years, have provided an incredible service to Los Angeles.
It's the greatest scam in the history of show business. Morning clouds and fog, hazy afternoon sun. What was the question?
Wow, there it is. There it is. Okay, last thing. I always close out each show with your one thing to do in LA this week. Your one thing to do in LA, if you have a day, a night, a weekend, and it can't be a Bob's Big Boy breakfast.
No.
What would it be?
I would say any night you can go to the Hollywood Bowl on a beautiful, warm night and see either the LA Philharmonic or a group of your choosing. When I'm sitting up there on a beautiful night, I say, man, this is a reason to live in LA.
Yes.
I know that's probably boring.
No, that's a beauty. And this is what I love about Los Angeles. And I think what all of us love about Los Angeles is even this so-called cliche or touristy or the easy answers are really magical. Like when you said Hollywood Bowl, like that's not a hidden gem. Everybody knows the Hollywood Bowl. But guess what? When you go to a show at the Hollywood Bowl
and it's warm and you're sitting around, like-minded people filled the audience. There are no bad seats. It's spectacular.
Beautiful, great environment. Awesome answer. Well, Fritz Coleman, go see him at the El Portal, North Hollywood, Unassisted Living. It's a monthly show. I'll put links on how to get tickets. But again, a true gem of Los Angeles. What was it? Treasure of Los Angeles. It's called by the city of Los Angeles. But Fritz Coleman, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
You're the best, my friend.
And your time. Too. And thank you so much. And for everybody, LA in a minute with Evan Lovett. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. You know the drill. Appreciate y'all. All right, y'all. It's been a minute.